burning up our flag, playing shitty country music. They forgot about the hag. Well, don't you think it's time we all got downright mad? Let's take our country back. Well, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And that's just what'll happen if you rob me to get a fix. No, I ain't messing around. I got no problem putting shitheads down. Let's take our country back.
We would like to thank our sponsor, Farmer Joe's Fresh Market, located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. Farmer Joe's proudly offers quality Braveheart beef, so don't eat no lab-made meat. Everything you need and more, Lee County's greatest grocery store, Farmer Joe's. Joining me on the show today, attorney, multimedia commentator, political analyst, Mr. Ford O'Connell. I'm Smoking Joe, and welcome to Cracker Culture. Ford, we've all said something that we would live to regret. Now, Senator Tommy Tuberville is showing a prime example, and I'm just going to show you a little video and let you tell me what you think.
My opinion of a white nationalist, if somebody wants to call him white nationalist, to me is an American. It's an American. Now, if that white nationalist is a racist, I'm totally against anything that they want to do, because I am 110% against racism.
There was immediate backlash to his comment, and on Tuesday he was asked why he insisted on saying white nationalists are American.
I'm totally against racism. And if the Democrats want to say that white nationalists are racist, I'm totally against that too.
But that's not a Democratic definition. The definition of a white nationalist
well, that's
is someone...
your definition. My definition is racism bad.
The definition,
next question.
The definition
next
is
question.
that the
next
belief
question.
that the white race is
Racism
superior to all other
racism's
races.
Totally out of the question.
So do you believe that white nationalists are racist?
Yes, if that's what a race is, yes. Thank you.
Today in Tuberville's weekly call with Alabama reporters, we asked him why he changed his tune.
Senator, why did your remarks on white nationalists change from Monday to Tuesday? Did anyone in Republican leadership reach out to you on this?
No, it didn't change. Here's what's happened. Since I've been here, the first day was January 6th, by the way, where we had problems in the Capitol. We came back to session that night, and from the Democratic side, we were all called white nationalists, white extremists. We were called everything in the book. They were pointing at us. And since I've been here, that's what they use. They use against us white extremists, white nationalists. If you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, if you're a Christian, and if you're a Trump supporter, that's what they call you. I do not want them to put us in that same category. I understand white nationalists are racist.
Tuberville says what he was trying to convey is that the Republican Party should not be synonymous with white nationalists, and he could have done a better job explaining what he meant in previous interviews.
Well, Ford, I understand what Tuberville was trying to say. And you know, in this political climate that we live in today, things that are really not meant as bad are going to be posed as bad by the left.
Well, that's exactly right. The Democrats are trying to cover up for Biden's bad record, so everyone who votes for Trump or everyone who's a Republican is a white nationalist. And that is just the landscape that we face. At the same time, though, you have to be a little bit wiser with your words. If you're Tommy Tuberville, you can never let the words white nationalist cross your lips. The Democrats want to get you into a race trap. Don't fall into that trap, and sadly, Tommy Tuberville did.
Well, I mean, but what he said is true. If you're white or a Republican, you're a white nationalist. Now, let's break that down. What's a nationalist?
Somebody who likes America.
And if you're white and you're a nationalist, you're automatically a racist.
Well, that's exactly right. And remember, they've used these terms even for people like Byron Donalds. They like to call him a white nationalist because he supports Donald Trump. And every single time, as we saw in the college admissions case, when Asians say, hey, we don't want to be discriminated in college admissions, the media immediately says, or at least the Democrats say, that Asians are carrying the water for white nationalism. This is something that no longer has a meaning. The word racism no longer has a meaning because the Democrats have destroyed the meaning because they're all about political power.
Yeah, it has become a cheap word they throw out at everything. And like you just said about Byron Donalds, I mean, what if I was a black nationalist or a red nationalist or, like you said, an Asian nationalist? Well, I don't understand. Is it just the word nationalist?
It's the combination of the two words, because remember, under the sort of crazy woke definition, only white people can be racist. And any non-white person who doesn't agree with a Democratic credo or mantra or script about ideas, then they're a racist too. This is an all-encompassing thing, and this is something, honestly, they've been doing for almost 2 decades now. It's just because the word racism has such a stigma now with younger voters that they like to continue to go back to this playbook when they have no new, fresh ideas. I think what's even crazier here is we know, Joe, that racism exists in the United States. But when you look at survey after survey, what you quickly recognize is that the United States, for all of its flaws, is one of the least racist countries on earth.
In today's time, I totally agree. Now, and I'll never say that we didn't have racial tensions back in the 60s and those eras. We did. Now, growing up like I did, my great-grandmother was an Indian. And I remember distinctly her telling us kids, when you go into town, tell them you're white so you don't get picked on. I'll never forget that.
Well, yes, there's no question about it. We are talking present day, and you're absolutely right. There were a lot of different things that went on in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s, 40s, and earlier. But to that point, we are talking about right now, post-2000, because I always tell people one of the greatest indicators that racism is on the decline in this country is when you look at interracial marriage. Interracial marriage in America is moving on up. So when you look at it from the American perspective, it's not there. But that's not the point of the Democrats. Democrats don't care about facts. This is about sliming Republicans. And when we look at Tommy Tuberville, why is he getting so much media attention? It's not just this comment. What Tommy Tuberville did earlier this week is he held up military promotions, particularly for the United States Marine Corps, because he's concerned about the Biden military's policies on abortion and transgendered surgeries.
Well, and again, I really like Tommy Tuberville. I've never, I've watched him in the past. I've worked in Alabama. I've seen some of his actions take place. However, I don't agree that racism is not American.
Let me say this. Yeah, but I hear exactly what you're saying. But when it comes to Tuberville, remember, he's been a football coach for 40 years at Auburn University, the War Eagles, at the University of Cincinnati. When it comes to him specifically, okay, I think it would have come out in the last 40 years.
But my point is the fact that racism don't exist, it does exist. It's just been reversed. Now, look, even as my shade, I'm tanner than most white people. There's certain areas I can't go in, especially like Chicago. There's places in Miami. Hell, there's places in Tampa. But the difference is not racism like we think of from white nationalists. It's actually the other ethnicities that express more what seems to be racism than white people. They've basically made white people afraid to say anything, and they say anything they want.
I think that there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think when it comes to the media definition of it, the media basically is telling you that only white people can be racist and therefore no one else can be racist. And that's truly unfortunate because we know that racism does not know a creed or a color. And it's truly unfortunate that that's the situation we're in. And that's in the same situation in a lot of white countries, okay? You see this in the United Kingdom and you see this in Canada, the notion that only white people can be racist. And unfortunately, that's not true. But overall, as you know, racism's on the decline in America, and definitely far lower than when you and I were very, very young.
I agree with that, Ford. I don't know if you watched the House Judiciary Committee. FBI Director Christopher Wray testified, but Florida man Senator Matt Gaetz, he brought the heat. Let's see what Matt said.
I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
you won't answer the question about whether or not that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you. How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
Well, the internet will remind you of that in moments. But let's now go to what the court said. The court said it was over 200,000 that have occurred on your watch. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
Again, I don't have the number as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems like a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch?
Man, look, Mike Gaetz always brings that Florida heat with him, but Ray had a bad day, and, he didn't answer nothing.
Well, that's exactly right. Look, you got to tip your hat to Matt Gaetz. He wants to get at the truth, and when it comes to Christopher Wray, he's like a dog who won't let go of the bone, and, you really have to admire that because, to your point, the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, does not want to answer any questions whatsoever about the very serious allegations against Hunter and Joe Biden when it comes to foreign briberies with China, Ukraine, and Romania. And the fact is, and I think Matt Gaetz is absolutely right, when you read between the lines, if you look at that questioning from Christopher Wray, you realize one thing. When it comes to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, he's very uninterested in getting to the bottom of what happened. Also, by his inability to answer questions, in some cases, it tells you that they don't really have an investigation into Hunter and Joe Biden, and they're not interested in starting one because what they're trying to tell you, particularly if you listen to Democrats in that hearing, because they believe such an investigation will ultimately help Donald Trump become the next president of the United States.
And the truth is, the American people just want an answer. We don't want this wishy-washy, well, I'm not going to answer that, or I can't talk on investigation, I can't talk on employment. He couldn't speak on nothing, and he had an excuse. Everything they brought up to him, he had an excuse why he couldn't speak on that.
Well, in Washington, they have a little phrase for that. It's called the Potomac two-step. And what they're basically doing is dragging it out, not answering anything, so that when CNN and MSNBC run their commentary, they're going to tell you that all of this stuff about Hunter and Joe Biden is a Republican obsession and fantasy. And basically what you have is you have the mechanisms of government, the FBI and the DOJ, blocking and tackling for Joe Biden. And it's truly, truly unfortunate. And it really makes you question law enforcement because remember, Christopher Wray has been the FBI director for, I believe, 7 years. The Hunter Biden investigation started under Obama. It's been about 8-9 years. He's been the person with the purview of this investigation for the entire time it's been going on, and he still doesn't seem to know basic facts.
Well, I thought he said that he didn't take that job until January 6th.
He took that job in 2017. The investigation to Hunter Biden was open 2015. So we're talking 2015 all the way to 2023. So he's been the FBI director through 3/4 of the Hunter and Joe Biden investigation, and essentially he doesn't have any answers. That seems a little crazy.
Well, you know, he was hammered also by Texas Representative Troy Nehls. And look, the question Troy posed to him, I don't know a soul that hasn't asked this question 100 times and come up with the same conclusion. I'm going to let you see what Troy asked him.
We need to go into the Capitol.
Into the Capitol.
Into the Capitol.
What?
We are going to the Capitol where our problems are. It's that direction. Please spread the word.
All right. Okay, but one more thing.
Yeah, so can we go up there? No?
When we go in,
are we going to get arrested if we go up there?
Yeah. You don't need to get shot.
Arrest us.
There he is, breaching the line, going in at the first breach into the Capitol grounds, the restricted area. Mr. Ray, you have arrested hundreds of people related to January 6th. And there have been people arrested for breaching Capitol grounds. Couey Griffin is an example. Rachel Genko is an example. And then we go to Mr. Brandon Streka. Brandon was arrested for disorderly and disruptive conduct, which included yelling, I quote, "Go, go, go," as rioters tried to empty the Capitol. These three never went into the Capitol. They never assaulted anyone. So let's be honest with each other. There is very little difference between the actions of Ray Epps and Brandon Streka that day, but yet Streka was arrested and Epps wasn't. Epps also testified to the January 6th committee. He was back at his hotel when video evidence showed that he wasn't. He lied. He was on the Capitol grounds just as Brandon Streka was. Epps even texted his nephew at 2:12 p.m. and said, I quote, "I was in the front with a few others." It was on the video. "I also orchestrated it." Now look into the camera, sir, when you answer my next question. Are you going to arrest Mr. Epps, yes or no?
I'm not going to engage here in a discussion about individual people who are or are not going to be prosecuted.
Can I get a commitment? You just watched the video. I'm an old law dog. I understand a little bit about probable cause. He did very little. There was very little difference what he did and Mr. Streka. You can see him. He's encouraging, I almost think he's inciting a riot. He's encouraging people the night prior to go into the Capitol, the day of, go into the Capitol, and he was at the first breach. And he breached the restricted area. Everybody, a lot of people getting arrested for not going into the Capitol, but they're in the restricted area. But yet, Ray Epps, who many people feel, fed, right? And there's a lot of clout over this. So my point is this. You arrested a lot of folks for unlawful activity. You just saw the video. And I will tell you, Mr. Ray, if you don't arrest Mr. Epps, there's a reason behind it. I believe you know what it is. And it appears to me you are protecting this guy. I strongly recommend you get your house back in order. With that, I yield back.
So, look, and again, even after this, Ray continued on, and the questions he did answer, Matt Gaetz come out today and said that he had not been honest. So, really, what has Ray done? I mean,
well, he's fanning the flames of silence. You know, basically, Ray and many in the media claim that this is a conspiracy theory, but yet they don't try to quash this theory. Now, why is that? Because look, to that video's point, why hasn't he been arrested or said he was in question? And even forget January 6th. Remember, starting on January 8th, Ray Epps was on an FBI Most Wanted poster. Now, how come everyone seems to know where this guy is on his ranch in Arizona, and you've got hundreds, really more than 1,000 that have been arrested and charged over this, and somehow this person isn't there? Okay, either he's a Fed or he's an informant. And let me tell you something. This idea that there are feds and informants and rallies is not a crazy idea, because every time you have a major rally in Washington, D.C., there are some version of undercover law enforcement among those rallies. So what the Republicans are talking about is not a conspiracy theory. The question is, why is this guy being untouched by the FBI?
I totally don't understand, and especially how the director of the FBI can set up there under oath and basically either lie or not answer the questions the public really has a right to know.
Well, because when they raise their right hand, they're not saying, will you be honest? They're saying, will you tell the truth? And playing dumb is telling the truth.
It's just ridiculous. Well, Ford, Lee County voters have a reason to be concerned. The announcement of the Millerites and Ballard Partners in Southwest Florida. This pairing will only secure the establishment stronghold here in Southwest Florida. Grassroots candidates are basically doomed, Ford.
Well, look, I will say this. This is quite a promotion for Terry Miller. Ballard Partners is the largest lobbying firm in Florida and at times has a very big lobbying practice in Washington, D.C. I have a lot of respect for folks within Ballard Partners, but when it comes to their new Southwest Florida office headed by Dane Eagle and now Terry Miller being a part of it, that's exactly right. If you're not part of the machine, you're going to have a hard time getting elected in Lee County.
And I mean, Ballard didn't need Miller. I mean, I don't understand why he would take the jump in with such a controversial strategist.
You know, I can't speculate as to why they hired him other than his known relationship with Dane Eagle, who I believe is manning or heading up their Fort Myers operation. So other than that, I mean, that's the only speculation. Remember, Terry Miller was Dane Eagle's campaign manager. So there you go.
Well, it's really going to be something to see. I feel a lot of animosity with the upcoming elections. We already know that they're trying to put in candidates that really don't have the credentials for the job, which they've already done here in Lee County. We're stuck with several that shouldn't be here.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. Not only are the powers that be, the establishment, sticking Lee County with candidates that aren't, qualified in terms of credentials, but also they're not good conservatives. They're marketed as good conservatives with a background who tell you they're going to do X. You put them in office, they turn around and do Y, and then they say, well, I was sort of forced to. No, we elected you to stand up and you choose not to. So again, shame on the whole process, because essentially you're sending sham candidates who conservatives want to believe in into office, taking part in the same old cronyism in Lee County.
Well, I've stated this for years and people just seem to fall on deaf ears. You don't elect no candidates in Southwest Florida. You either buy them or they're appointed. They're not, your votes really don't matter here.
Well, it's very, very rare. We've had a couple where they've been elected, but you're absolutely right. Generally speaking, you're right. They're not elected. They're basically either appointed or bought. And you could go down the list, and there are, again, a few exceptions, but there aren't many of them. And it's a matter of time. People need to wake up to this fact, because while we have a very red Southwest Florida, it should be a lot redder, and we should have a lot more qualified people in office.
Well, we've discussed the dissension within our local RECs in the past, but this infighting continues, and the childlike back and forth has become repulsive. I mean, it's hard to watch. In an effort to usurp the current board of the Lee County REC, the establishment members who lost formed their own group. This group is called the Conservative Leadership Caucus, chaired by the defeated Never-Trumper Andrew Sun and Doris Cortez. Let's also mention the treasurer, the nepotism dynasty's own Mrs. Sanspur Persons. Ford, can you believe this team of all-stars?
Yes, I can, because that's exactly what the establishment does. When they lose, they get mad and they basically try to undermine the very process that they said that they should be elected to because they were the better candidates. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time with the establishment. You beat them at the ballot box, they just regenerate, and then they try to gut the organization. And this is truly, truly unfortunate. And the worst part is this new guys that they have under the Conservative Leadership Caucus. I've read their materials. On face value, I agree with pretty much everything they're selling until you look exactly at who's running that organization, whether it's Judy Person, Doris Cortez, or Andrew Sun. You recognize very quickly that these people don't always necessarily share your values. What they share is their own self-improvement and their own succession to move up the food chain.
Well, I've stated this, and people can get upset if they want to. This new Conservative Leadership Caucus is nothing more than a PAC to fund establishment candidates.
I think that is spot on. I mean, when you look at who's in charge, when you look at who they're backing, when you look at everything else, that's exactly it. It's another vehicle for the Millerites to run roughshod over Southwest Florida.
Well, you know, before you talked about people thinking Ray Epps was a Fed and things like that. There's another guy here that lives in Southwest Florida that's been accused of being a Fed during the January 6th because he actually went in the Capitol and he got not even as much as a smack on the wrist. And I'm talking about the Long Island Leech. He come out and criticized Turning Point USA and Donald Trump for their affiliation with Lindell and Roger Stone. Mr. Stone replied, depicting the Rhino Rump Rider as the demented midget. And I want to show you a picture of what they had. Stone said. He said, let's see, I have approximately 4 times as many followers as demented midget Brandon Leslie. I'm a New York Times best-selling author, a veteran of 12 national Republican presidential campaigns. I'm 5'11", while you're 5'4". Who is more formidable? So,
I will just say this: don't ever mess with Roger Stone, because if you try to mess with him, he's going to give you the horns. And I'll be honest,
Roger.
You know, Roger. I've met Roger many times. I've been on TV with Roger, done different things with Roger. He's a very, very smart guy. What I can say about Roger is I'm glad he's on our side, because if he wasn't, I'd be very, very worried about facing him.
Well, look, the few times I've got to meet Roger, I've always enjoyed it. Roger is a fun guy to talk to. He's got a great personality. And,
fantastic personality.
Yeah. And his wit is uncomparable. He comes up with some stuff off the fly. It's pretty funny. But I want to ask you a question, Ford. As citizens, do we not have a civic duty to question our elected officials?
Absolutely. And if we are not questioning our elected officials, even ones that we like, then we honestly are not living up to the promise of our constitutional republic.
Well, when the chair of the local school board calls constituents vile for asking questions and states that he does not respond to them or anyone who affiliates with them, that seems like a dereliction of duty to me, Ford. What say you?
Well, I know exactly who you're talking about when it comes to elected officials, and there is no question that you've got your boots on his chin, and he doesn't know what to do about it. And frankly, he should just answer your questions versus ignoring you.
Well, and the reason I wanted to say this, I've got his email because I put in a FOIA request for his emails, and this he sent to a former school board member, Betsy Bond, and he simply said, I don't tell her, you should stop listening to Joe Phillips. He is vile. I do not respond to him or any of these that associate with him. Now, he's telling people who they should talk to or who they should listen to. I've never personally, outside of a board meeting, spoke with Betsy Bond that I can recall. So I don't know where that's coming from. But however, Betsy asked about me questioning sunshine violations. Look, if I'm getting information that the other members of the board don't know and Armour's bringing it out, somebody's talking.
Look, you raise a lot of great questions, and it also, it raises a lot of questions about Armour's leadership of the school board. The fact that you know about this stuff it means that it's being leaked somewhere, and therefore the public has a right to know, and he needs to get to the bottom of it. I mean, I think next week when we do this, instead of cracker culture, I think you need to cross out the cracker part, and we're just going to put vile culture, and then we're just going to have a talk about that.
Well, again, if I'm considered vile for asking the questions that everybody else is afraid to be, then I'll own that moniker with pride.
Well, look, you're doing the right thing because you're the one who's asking questions about the school board. And we know that more than $1 billion goes to their hands each year. Lee County residents really need to know what's going on with Lee County schools. And unfortunately, the current school board, like the previous school board, is really not living up to their duties as elected officials.
And I totally agree. And as an advocate, to hear the chairman of the school board make a comment that he's not going to acknowledge anything an advocate says or anybody associated with him. You're saying that you're not going to take up what has been brought to you about children that are being neglected or being abused inside the school system, which I've pointed out several cases, which we had a teacher fired for child abuse. We had a grandmother who done an interview, and I've kind of held back because it's coming out in the mainstream media, of her granddaughter getting brutally beaten within Armour's district. Nobody stands up about these things except for a couple of us. And the reason we stand up, because you got people like the Purple Hippos, they'll come in and they'll talk, well, they really will. They'll talk about anything that don't matter. They'll talk about, make sure we get the pornographic material back in the school. Why, instead of trying to push for things like that, why are they not out speaking and other advocates not out speaking against the things that we can see that are not going correctly in our district?
But look, it's not only that you're pointing these things out, but you're doing it through the proper channels, whether it's in meetings and other items. And that's what is so frustrating here, because at the end of the day, whatever differences Armour may have with you, you're raising very real points that can only benefit the school district. And he seems to be shilling it out and pretending like it doesn't exist. He's acting a lot like the Democrats in Washington, D.C. Well, he's the unquestioned king of the school board, and you can't ask him questions.
Well, he runs on a Republican or conservative ticket, but Armour's the most liberal person in the Southwest Florida politics, in my opinion.
Well, look, whether it's politics or not, here's the deal: is he's acting like an unquestioned king when it comes to things that you are bringing up. And I've never been a big fan of these nonpartisan elections because I think that they always need to have party affiliation next to it so that voters know what they're dealing with.
Well, yeah, you need to know where they stand, because if you don't, you end up with what we've got right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I made this point up in Charlotte County. Many times I've been asked about this question when I'm speaking there, and they say, hey, what do you think about these MP elections? If I were governor, they'd be gone.
Right. I agree. I want to bring an update on the story we covered last week. Me and you talked about that one of the council members' children had been exposed to some materials about how men can marry men and women can marry women. From our last story, I have heard it has been looked into. I don't want to give you an actual number, but from what I understand, there's 80 new incidents in Cape Coral summer camps of this happening.
That's an epidemic. I mean, they all need to be looked into, but this is very, very serious. And this is what happens when you ask questions. Because remember, questions were being posed and no one was answering them.
Yeah, and again, I went straight to the source on that for the simple reason is if it was my kid, you might not have heard of it except from me. But it being somebody in an elected office and they get upset, you're going to hear about it, and you should. But we should treat all children like everybody's children is equal, no matter if they're elected or not elected, no matter what color, no matter what affiliation their parents have with their political party. All children need the right to be children.
Look, I think we've said that for almost a year now. I can't agree with you more. You cannot be taking away a child's innocence. The world is tough enough after you turn 18. You need to let them be children.
Well, it's tough enough just being a kid, let alone having people trying to confuse you like this.
Hey, we've always, we talked about that when we talked about that last week. I still stand by this point. When it comes to teachers, when it comes to educators, when it comes to counselors, there's two things I should never know about my teachers, educators, and counselors. One is what your sexual orientation is, and two, what your political affiliation is. Those are two things I should never know from a teacher or a counselor.
And me and you can't agree more on that point. Well, Ford, I thank you for joining us again today. Like always, we enjoy your expertise in these situations. We're just doing the best we can. We got you as the man.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, my friend.
Well, Ford, I hope to see you next week. You got anything coming up?
I'm battling the Democrats every which way to Sunday. And I think what's crazy here is one thing we'll be talking about going forward. It's a very big topic in the dog days of summer, and that's the question in August of whether or not Trump's going to debate.
I don't think he has a problem with it. I think others might.
Well, let's put it this way. We're going to see it right now with the position he's in. The world's his oyster. He can do what he wants to do, but I'll say if he doesn't debate, that's going to put a lot more pressure on Ron DeSantis.
Well, I'm going to say this, since you said that, I was going to stop, but I want to say one thing. Locally, here in Lee County, if your candidates refuse to debate, question it, because nobody that is backed by Terry Miller will debate.
Correct. I have seen that up close and personally, and that's the whole point. They don't want to debate. In Trump's case, I think it's a little bit different, where he sees it sort of like he's earned the right for a first round bye. I think he's eventually going to debate. And Trump, he likes to debate.
Right.
At the same time, though, there's so many candidates. He wants to see the field cold a little bit, if you will, because, again, there's only one other person right now that can be the Republican nominee other than Donald Trump, and that's Ron DeSantis, and everyone else is just playing for another job.
Well, we just got to wait and see, folks. You got to get out there and do your research, do your homework, find out who's going to speak best for what you think is right for your country. Ford, thanks again. I'm Smoking Joe for the Cracker Culture Podcast. We'll see you next time, Florida. Love, peace, and gator grease.